earth.
We're live now. So, hi everyone. Welcome to the middle of our pre-chat here. Welcome to the Octopus Movement podcast. This is, as always, our sanctuary for nonlinear minds, where we celebrate unconventional thinkers and tap into their unique power to change the world. I'm your host for today, Isis Fabian. Very excited to be here with another founding member, Zen Benefiel. Am I saying your name right, Zen? I forgot to ask you that. Awesome.
I go
Zen,
by Hey You too.
Sorry?
I go by Hey You too.
Good to know. I'll be sure to use that. Hey You is an author many times over, transformational coach, nonprofit leader, host of his own podcast where he has fascinating apocalyptic chats. Zen, thank you for being here. Tell us, why do you do what you do? Who are you?
Oh gosh, that's a huge question. I hope I can truncate it. It started early as being an orphan and adopted, finding out I was adopted at 4.5 when my sister arrived, who was also adopted, different parents. And it left me with a question of, I've been going to Sunday school a little bit. So I had this, the normal, who's my parents, why'd they give me up, all that kind of stuff. But then I had this residing question is, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them? So I don't know if it was weeks or maybe a month later, I'm standing in front of a window at night waiting for Dad to get home, looking out over the front porch. And all of a sudden I hear this big booming voice say, "Hey, you." That's why I referenced the "Hey, you," right? And I didn't interact with it. I spun around real quick and asked my mother if she could hear it. She was sitting about 15 feet away. And she says, "What voice?" And I said, "That voice." You can imagine a 4.5-year-old trying to talk deeply, right? And she said, "No, I didn't hear any voice. It must have been a peeping Tom." Well, at that point, there was something inside of me that recognized it was internal and non-frightening. I mean, it was warm, fuzzy, all-powerful, kind of the ultimate father figure voice that you would expect in just those two words. And then so I started spending evenings or night without my parents around, lights on, looking out a window and projecting the voice out in the same tone. And I would stand there and I'd wait for it to come back. Well, you know how we kind of get lost in our thoughts while we're waiting on things, right? So I finally learned how to shut up. And when I did, I heard the voice again. So I began conversing with it. Fast forward, 18 years old, I'm in the pre-med program at Ball State University, tested out of 5 quarters going in. And in between first and second quarters, I come back and I'm just distraught. I don't know where I want to go, what I want to do. Medicine didn't seem, I wanted to work on healing and harmony already. And so I come back from break and I hit my knees and I pray. And I don't know if, people are used to that. Some do, some don't. It works for me. And so I said, "Father, I want to know what truth is, and I'm willing to die for it if necessary." Well, lo and behold, be careful what you ask for. Coming back from class the following Tuesday on 11/11/1975, I do the obligatory bong hit and album side meditation and listening to Journey's first album. Halfway through one of the songs, I hear this voice ask me in between the vocals and the vamp. My given name's Bruce. It says, "Bruce, are you willing to die for what you believe in?" Now, if that didn't make you butt pucker, right? So once I did that, it's like, okay, what do I believe in? Christ consciousness. Felt a little empty. Wasn't sure why. Didn't question it. Moved on. My next thought was cosmic consciousness, elevating that, right? It felt full. So I said yes. And then instantly I hear guitar riff, sounds like a rocket ship taking off. I get a tug from my solar plexus. I pop out of body, turn to look at my body laying across my dorm room bed, turn back to look where I'm going. And before I can get fully turned around, I'm engulfed by white light. And it has this, you can tell just by my expression, the kind of sensation that was there. And then as I'm just residing in it, I start thinking, not realizing I'm thinking, but I've got this sense of high-pitched, iridescent, effervescent sensation. Then I realize I'm analyzing it. Oh, I'm thinking. I can't be dead. Woo-hoo! Right? Then the impetuous teenager, I'm 18, right, says, "Wow, is there more?" This kind of a flippant question. I feel a movement. I'm in an indigo background now with points of light surrounding me. And I know those points of light are points of consciousness, whether in body or not. I'm not sure because I know I'm not. I've got the sense that they are somehow, though. And then the voice picks back up. And this is what really has driven my life. It says, these are those that you are to work with in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Understatement. Have faith and trust that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow. And then I feel another rush of energy and I'm back in my body, taking a gulp of air, retaining that sensation in my body now, and instantly understanding that we are all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware. So that's driven me to ask all kinds of questions, be radically curious, go where no one else has ever gone, and trying to find and relate corroborative stories, first of all in the ancient texts. And I found similar philosophy in the Vedantic philosophy, and that is that we're all divine threads condensed. They don't say condensed, but we're all divine threads connected to a central source independently and capable of God consciousness. So that all makes sense, especially today when we're understanding all kinds of quantum physics revelations, if you will, apocalyptic notions, and then having that all kind of begin to blend and merge. Then my exploration has been into, okay, how do I facilitate people, places, and things to work together better? And my professional history has been all about doing that in different industries and different environments. Most recently with the apocalyptic chats, I thought, okay, I'm going to check in. My wife, Luba, says in April of 21, she says, you really need to start talking to people again. You're brilliant. You got stuff to say. People love you. I don't know. And but anyway, she says, I give you permission. So, and the reason she did that, back in 1990, I produced a show called One World. The new one's One World in a New World. One World, same kind of philosophy. How'd you get where you're at? What fears did you encounter? How did you overcome them? What prompted you to do what you're doing from both inner and outer perspectives? And how do you see that fitting into the common human experience around you? That kind of thing. Well, that was 30 years ago. So now coming off the 30-year hiatus, I've got a little more understanding and a tad bit more wisdom and better questions to ask, right? And more of a robust background that now I can understand and listen to people from where their perspective is and be able to respond in that way. Ultimately, I want to show that we're all going through this almost excruciatingly fun process of reintegrating with ourselves and learning how to self-love, how to get connected with everything that's around us, because that's how we're designed. And this natural order that's emerging as a new world order that's coming from within all of us that we don't talk about. We live half inside, half outside. We're bereft of conversing about the inner worlds, let alone, feeling like we're sane enough to do so, because we've often, those of us who've had experiences and tried to articulate them, a lot of folks, because there's no direct experience, we sound batshit crazy, right? Yeah. And I get that. I mean, I've had this, 40, almost 50 years of learning how to articulate and saying things differently so that they're better understood and more easily, simplified, kind of like Einstein says, if you can explain it to a 5-year-old, you got it. If you can't, right? So that's kind of where things are. And with the apocalyptic chats, what I wanted to do was feature that word, It doesn't mean catastrophic end of the world. It means uncovering knowledge.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping to re-educate or, bring that fuller understanding from its original source back into play, because we've lost so many things as a result of marginalized propaganda, for lack of a better.
Right. And with modernity, right, has taught us this kind of illusion of control and certainty and predictability over our environment, such that an apocalypse, right, a big ending and ending so there could be a new birth, a new beginning. These things just cause abject fear in
Right.
most
And
of us.
like I say, 15,000 years ago, we got the memo, right? Now we're understanding, especially like with the regenerative culture that's emerging, that, how we can restore our connection, our lives with nature. This is an old, indigenous way of life that, because we've got caught up in the industrial age and the production, the consumerism and all this kind of stuff, the want of control, right? Because we want stuff. And so we got to do things to get stuff. Well, those doing things don't often resonate with our core of our being.
Right.
We get angst and frustrated and angry and mobile because of that. And we don't know how to create our own reality, which is the gift that we all have. We just have to exercise it. And there's various ways of doing that.
Yeah. And just like when you talk about, recommuning or reconvening with nature, right? I'm reminded, you're talking about indigenous cultures, how many on Turtle Island would speak of humans as the youngest species, right? Instead of as this like apex species that, Western thought has us, seeing ourselves as separate from nature. Oh, let me go back to nature as an other, nature as a separate thing and not something that I'm a part of and something that I have successfully, dominated as a member of the human race, right? Instead,
Right.
What if we look at ourselves as the youngest, most naive species? We have a tremendous amount of power, but it's just one of many different ways that we can see.
Right, because we've got the five fingers, we can manipulate things.
Right.
And so we choose to do so. That's part of our own evolutionary process. However, in that process, as we expand our consciousness to recognize first each other, first self, right? Then each other, then the planet, and then the solar system. This is a type 0 civilization, type 1, type 2, type 3, according to the Kardashev scale, right? So this also encompasses a growth of consciousness and awareness and interconnectivity and being available. We each, in that divine thread that we're connected to, whatever we want to call source, there's infinite intelligence specific to each of us. We just have to ask the right questions and shut up. Right? Because it's like thinking. Interesting. Satan comes from the word thetan. It's a Greek word, thetan. It means thinker. The reason I know it's because I looked up in the university, 4-inch thick, 2-volume set. And the very first reference to the word Satan was thetan. Greek, means thinker. So how do we get in our own ways? Right? We think too much. We ask questions, just kind of sit with it. It's uncomfortable because we're used to the 70,000 thoughts a day that we have. Well, how do you minimize those? How do you mitigate the self-deprecating ones? And then flip those into more self-acknowledging ones. Mm-hmm. This is a process. It's a discipline. You have to be aware you can do it and then choose to do so. And that's where the excruciatingly fun part comes in.
I wrote that phrase down. I love that when you said that. And I think you mentioned quantum physics too. I think we have a lot of hubris about and assumptions we kind of outsource to science and this.
Well, here's one. I'll give you right away that I got the deer in the headlights look from a TA of Lawrence Krauss's at a science cafe one night. The Higgs boson that was discovered is supposedly the God particle. I actually wrote a book called The God Participle Being. In that, I said, is it possible that what was seen as the decay of a unknown particle, right, that you assumed was there to begin with, is it possible that that data was misread and that it's actually a self-repairing rip in the fabric between dimensions? Because you've got a subatomic explosion happening. What's that going to do? Deer in the headlights. Didn't know how to answer it. And yet, based on M theory, multiple, and the Nepean-Close's triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm, which states that simply, here's the 5-year-old, consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 dimensions. So that model fits with a direct experience I had called the multi-plane awareness that William Swigart developed in the 50s and I experienced in 1989. So I'm always looking for, okay, here's the experiential side. Where's the science that backs it up?
Right.
And then how can we merge those two in order to provide more experiential opportunities?
Right.
Because that's where it's the visceral thing that's where you learn, right? It's a direct experience. Books, tapes, people, podcasts, whatever, great stuff. However, until you bring it into yourself, make it your own, and integrate that and behave in a different way, then it's kind of worthless.
Right. It's kind of like I always say you can't, you're not going to see in order to believe, right? You have to believe in order to see. And I think deconstructing some of this hubris around what we think science knows, right? Like scientists don't know what gravity is. One of the leading theories of gravity and why such a weak force is that it's spread across the multiverse, right? There's so many theories out there because they don't know.
Exactly. And you've got historic references to guys and gals who can levitate. Well, how do you do that? Right?
Right.
And yet it's there. Now, is that because there's proof, is it now believable? So how do we do that? And is it necessary? Right? All of these parlor tricks, if you will, just show us the capacity that we have. Now, how we use that, and in my experience, there is absolutely no possible malevolence in this consciousness space, including those who are visiting us from elsewhere, which kind of, have an off-planet view in the background, right? There are those who are here to help, and they are doing so. And a lot of our nonlinear thinkers have that touch of cosmic consciousness, if you will, at that level, where they recognize that, yeah, there's something else going on. There's others that I can speak with internally that are available.
God. And we take for granted the external material reality, which I don't know if you read Don Hoffman's work in his book, A Case Against Reality. There's nothing fundamental, right, about our like visual experience of material reality. Is much more like a desktop on a computer, where it's like you see the desktop, but that is not what's going on inside the computer. That's an analog environment created for you to navigate, the deeper, truer reality. And so as you start to peel those things back, I think we develop some humility, and then we're open to these other experiences, these things beyond the five senses that can give you that direct experience.
I'm not so sure that beyond the five senses. I think it's those five senses that are more finely developed across those 9 dimensions, right? Because we still have that same analysis process, right? And it's all vibratory. Across the electromagnetic spectrum, we see less than 1% as the visual spectrum, right? So you've got all these other layers of what we call rays or states of consciousness. Each one of them has different stuff on it that integrates us further. Now, I know that I'd say that really simply, but and when you understand or have an experience of that, you get different perspectives from an all-seeing, all-knowing in that moment to the actual physical, practical, pragmatic daily tasks that are necessary in order to move you forward in your own life path. Now, how do you discover your life path? There's all kinds of methods. There's human design, self-analysis stuff, human design, which includes Vedantic philosophy, Tao Te Ching, I believe it's either the Upanishads or Bhagavad Gita, but other astrology, Kabbalah. So this is a way that includes all of those methodologies and kind of gives you an idea based on your birth date of who you are, what you do, and the challenges you face. And I find it impeccably accurate. So those kinds of things, on a professional level, you've got DISC and Colby and Myers-Briggs and those kinds of things. I've been assessors on self-assessments my entire life because I want to know me. I want to make sure I know me. And if there's areas that I'm missing, that self-examination will reveal it.
Right.
Now, am I crazy for doing so or for being so obsessed on getting to know me? If I know me, then I can know others.
Right. Yeah. And that is the first step for so many of us, right? Is the actual impulse and desire to authentically know ourselves, to look at the things that we don't want to admit about ourselves, or the origins of our behaviors and attitudes and all of these things, right? I think, for anyone, it's there below the surface. If you haven't interrogated it yet, you're aware that it exists.
Right. Now, the key is to harvest that past, not carry it as baggage.
I like that.
We had the experience, learn from it, grow from it. Don't drag it with you. Right? It's all about the forgiveness of self to begin with. Just like, okay, it happened. End of story. Right. Let it stay there. You don't have to constantly reprocess it to figure out why. You recognize it happened, you grew from it, and you've got that in the present to move into the future. Unfortunately, historically, we drag the past. And you hear phrases like, history repeats itself. Does it? Are we capable of change?
It's a big question.
Yeah.
Are we capable of change? Are we capable of growing into greater alignment with our intended purpose for being here? I always work with those the difference between change and growth, and then us as a human species, as a planetary, entity. Can we grow? Can we mature? Or are we going to keep getting in our own way?
I believe we can, and we do. I got the opposite opinion from John Hewitt, who I just interviewed recently, and he's the owner of Liberty, or founder of Liberty Tax, a billion-dollar company. And he thinks that we're still headed down customer service-wise, and I tend to agree with that. It sucks in most places because it's not customer-centric. Now, on the other side of things, I do believe that I witnessed, like with COVID, all right, silver lining, got people to sequester and self-examine, potentially. Now, how do you come out of that in creating or co-creating a new normal?
Yeah.
What's that going to look like? You're still trying to drag the old normal along, in most cases. And as I said before, harvest, move forward, take what worked and move forward with it. And I do see that happening. And how I see that happen, or saw it happening initially, was just a few months after COVID began. Virtual groups started popping up with people looking for each other. I've been part of a friendship bench for 3.5 years as a result of that. And these are people that meet every week that talk about how to move through stuff. And in those kinds of ways, and the global, speaking of regenerative culture, the global regenerative collab also came up, almost divinely inspired, I guess, in December of 2019, and then COVID hit in January through March of 2020. They're a collection of probably mostly nonlinear thinkers that have skill sets and want to apply them towards building some kind of regenerative culture across the world in various locations, specifically looking at the bioregion effects, which we don't. Right? We take a solution, we apply it ubiquitously, thinking it's going to work, instead of looking at, okay, what fits here might not fit over here because of blah, 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 right? And looking for better solutions. Now, this is what I began, in 2009. I got the tap on the shoulder to look up planetary citizens and see if the domain was available. Surprisingly, it was. After I argued with myself for a while, saying it wasn't going to be available, right? So it was. I took it down. built a website showcasing those that are doing things toward this effort of transformation, of making the world a better place and uniting people. In 2023, I took it to the next step, which was filing for nonprofit status. Got that in December, which was amazing. First of all, in that not only did we get the 501c3 status, they took us to the next level, gave us permission, if you will, with a 509A2, which is like a 501 on steroids, because not only can you get donations and sponsorships, you can also earn income. So it gives us that advantage of creating social enterprises, which is the idea of how do we integrate and pull all this information into specific places and talk about it in ways that, panel discussions, articles, connecting with others, connecting silos that didn't know about each other to begin with, and start working on the networking as opposed to the competition side of things. Because with this new consciousness, we understand at least partially what oneness sort of means, right? It's those individual threads that work together in a collective with specific details and designed for each individual who chooses to step up and ask the questions of, who am I, what am I here to do, and how do I do it?
It's like, I'll go back to what you were saying earlier about, you boil it all the way down to those day-to-day tasks or the things we have to do kind of in the, as the individual ego, as the individual person, you can have that higher purpose. And if you're lucky, you understand it really well, right? But then the practicalities of the day-to-day and also just the constant interrogation of the self. I pointed out before we started that I use all pronouns because I'm gender free. I'm agender. I don't identify with the gender construct whatsoever. If I woke up tomorrow in a man's body, it would feel just as weird as being in this body. And maybe that's a, nonlinear experience I have of being in a body in the first place.
Right. Well, I use the same kind of thing. We. Yeah. Right. It's that combination, and we're all together. Cuckoo, ka-choo. Right. So in that, it's just, in my opinion, it's imperative that we take those looks, that we be willing to step back and see ourselves differently, see others differently, be open to what's available. And as part of my training, I guess I have a couple of master's degrees in business, so I could actually have the paper to show that, I kind of know what I'm doing. And then worked as a partnering facilitator for building road and bridge construction projects, and also as a transformational coach. So I'm able to apply those elements of understanding, if you will, both from the hard skill and the soft skills side. The hard skills being structure, right? Here's the plan, here's the action items, here's the day-to-day, here's the moment-to-moment, here's the reframing of your previous, when those self-deprecating thoughts come up, here's a way to reframe that and move forward and leave that one behind. And then also with the soft skills, how do you work with others? How do you listen actively? How do you empathize? How do you be still and wait for that voice, like the third insight in the Celestine prophecy? How do you remain still and only speak when it comes from deep within you? Right? How do you bring that into a board meeting? Right. Yeah. And it's interesting, as time is also nonlinear, that in those moments, even a simple pause with the intention to do so can shift the energy in a room and reframe it so that it comes into more alignment, especially with the partnering workshops. I'd have anywhere from 20 to 80 people in a room. Multi-million-dollar, one of them was $500 million. Lots of people. Work stoppage costs thousands of dollars. So there's all this issue resolution process that we go through that defines the issues ahead of time so that they know when they're going to occur, because it's a 2 to 5 year schedule, right? So they know when these things are going to occur. They have a resolution plan in place so that when it happens, they can pull the trigger on that and there's no work stoppage as a result. Key feature, right? Which truncates schedules and offers value engineering and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, there's these practices belong, everywhere and in everything that we do. And I know we're just at time, so I have to wrap us up. Unfortunately, that went really fast. But everyone, you heard from our esteemed thought leader. Love to hear what's sticking for you, how you think about things differently after what we heard from Zen today. Before we close out, Zen, any final words of wisdom, quick words for our listeners to help them activate their own nonlinear potential?
Well, I like the attitude behind a greeting and a closing that I use for my podcast, and that's namaste and in lak'ech. Namaste comes from the Sanskrit. It means the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. In lak'ech, alakin is the entire phrase, comes from the Mayan. It means I am another you.
It's true. That's my definition of love right there, right? When you really are feeling love, that's the embodied experience of that reality.
Pure and simple. Pure and simple. When we're in that place, we're open, we're caring, we're loving, we're sharing, we're doing all the things that of, these aspirational values that we hold internally that we've had some cognitive dissonance with because we're not practicing them.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Zen. I wish we could keep going. I loved what you said about the excruciatingly fun work of getting to know ourselves, of harvesting the baggage or harvesting the past, not letting it be baggage. I just wanted to call those two things out again because I thought that was some really just incredible language. And just a reminder, everyone, today of what happens when you change the language around things. And these examples that Zen just gave us at the end, the divine in me, recognizing the divine in you, what happens when we kind of exist and live that way as our reality. So there you have it, everybody. Another taste of one of the incredible people in the Octopus Movement, one of our founding members. Remember to embrace what makes you weird, unleash your nonlinear superpowers, and join our movement for a future that blooms. That's it for today. Looking forward to swimming with everyone next time. Thank you so much, Zen.
You're very welcome. Thank you.